In this video, I want to talk about how John Williams uses the orchestral percussion section, because he almost never just lays down a beat. In fact, while studying scores for this video, what really stood out was how often he doesn't use the percussion section at all. The one word that summarizes how Williams uses percussion is support. And in this video, we're going to look at examples of how he uses percussion to support accents, to support the form, to support bass lines, and to support melodies. The main role given to percussion in this score is to support accents. These can be downbeats or punching chords or any of these different moments that need a little extra force. At the very opening of March of the Resistance, we have 3 bars of this rhythmic figure that acts like a fanfare. The cymbal and timpani give it even more punch by hitting the downbeats of each bar. I'm going to play the examples here in reduced form, because the point is not the way the colors blend, but really how the percussion is functioning and its role in the orchestration. Later in that same cue, the entire orchestra has a crescendo, and there's a rising line into the downbeat. He supports the crescendo with a suspended cymbal and a roll on the timpani. And then on beat 2, when the entire orchestra rests for just a single 16th note, he has this huge crash cymbal. Crashing on everyone else's silence is almost like an anti-accent. There's an interesting moment in Scherzo for X-Wings where you can see how even if a percussion instrument is unpitched, its general character of high, medium, and low is being matched to the register of what it's supporting. So here, the triangle, a very high sound, is being used to accent the highest notes of the violin and woodwind line. The cymbal supports the horns and trumpets, and the bass drum has another one of those anti-accents where it's highlighting the gap in the low register for this beat. Also, some people pointed out in a different video that John Williams does not work alone, he also has orchestrators. In particular, on this score, William Ross is credited as orchestrator, so our hats off to him. Thank you for your work. Anytime here where I say John Williams does this, I'm including his whole team. The snare drum is used surprisingly rarely in all the examples I looked at. An example of when we do hear it is to support these brass accents that are an accompaniment to the main theme. The snare doesn't get its own independent part, but is joined by the timpani in almost exact rhythmic sync with the trumpets and trombones. Another thing we can do with percussion is support the form, which means draw attention to these moments where sections end and new sections begin. The most frequent way I've seen this happen is with a suspended cymbal. So in Ray's theme, right before rehearsal mark 58, we have a cymbal swell crescendo into the downbeat. Notice that it's also joined by a timpani roll. And both instruments are supporting the fact that we have a rising melodic line and a crescendo written in all the other parts of the orchestra. Most of the other examples are pretty much the same as this, so let's move on to how the percussion supports bass and melodic parts. Not surprisingly, when Williams uses percussion to support the bass, he uses the timpani. Thomas Goss has a great video about how the timpani is not a bass instrument, so once again we're emphasizing that word, support. In the cases where he is supporting that bass line tends to be simple and rhythmic. Like here, the timpani is doubling the cellos, double basses, and tuba on this very short, accented accompaniment part. Or here, the basses, cellos, and bassoons are holding down a tonic pedal point while the timpani thumps out quarter notes at the same pitch. It feels like a march, so not surprisingly it's from the cue March of the Resistance. It only happens for 8 bars, and this is one of those rare examples where the percussion is being used for pulse or beat. The timpani is not the only percussion instrument with pitch, and often the percussion will be used to support the melodic line. The opening of Ray's theme features a combined texture of celesta and flutes, but in the original recording, the flutes really dominate the sound, and the celesta is just there for support without really being the focus of what we hear. Later in that same theme, the woodwind counterlines are doubled by the glockenspiel. This adds extra articulation to the rhythm of the melody, and I also think it helps separate that very high pitch register of the counterline from the mid register of the main melody. The melodic support doesn't always have to be a literal doubling. In this example, the glockenspiel has a variation of the violin part. The percussion section is just one of the 4 main sections of the orchestra, and another section that composers tell me they don't really know what to do with is the brass. That's why you have to check out this video here, where I talk about how John Powell uses a massive brass section in How to Train Your Dragon, and how he separates the sections within the section, and why the trumpets don't really get to play as much as everyone else. Thanks for watching, I will see you in the next one.